Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, where inspired women talk about the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness. We ask, in what ways can we show up more fully, live more meaningfully, parent more wholly, and love more unconditionally? How can we mine the wisdom from the experiences of our lives and expand into those challenges? If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs, so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way. And if you feel like giving a little back to this free content, please become a patron of the show and receive extra member benefits for less than a coffee a month. Or you can leave a review on iTunes and Facebook, all of which helps the podcast keep going and reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul. Head on over to patreon.com/NTM podcast to find out more. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today's podcast is Stop Separating Relationship and Parenting. So we both have some pretty strong convictions about this conversation. So we thought perhaps this is a conversation you would like to have. And I just wrote a post on it this morning, and it inspired a conversation between us. So we thought, you know, the conversations that inspire us are probably the ones that you love to listen to too. So here we are in ISO talking about the focus points of relationship and parenting, which is probably what becomes most clear, isn't it, during this time?
Yeah, and I think we were also saying before that we started recording it, it's like around some kind of weird twilight zone.
Yeah.
This time of like life, of uncertainty, of like not even knowing what day of the week it is, and you know, sometimes feeling like you just want to like do everything yesterday and like, you know, like learn all the things, and like you're up and at 'em and you go, and you want your family to kind of come on the journey with you in your new inspired place. And then other days you're like, I can't even, right?
That's so true.
And, you know, you watch like movies back to back, or like, you know, you get to the end of the day, because I have this practice with my daughter and we talk about her day, and she'll be like, oh, so talk about my day. And sometimes we'll be like, I'll be thinking, I'm like, I fucking don't even know what we did.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit like that at the moment.
And was that today or was that yesterday?
Yeah, like which day was that I'm talking about? Because it's a little bit hard to remember right now. I'm guessing we went for a bike ride. I'm guessing we played with this. We'll just talk about that. But yeah, I want to preface this conversation with where we find ourselves and how we're all going through that in the family unit. It was this kind of weird being suspended in space kind of feeling, which is beautiful and also super disorienting. And I see that can come out in like the edges that we find ourselves in relationship with each other, and the sticking point sometimes that can seem really strange that we can become fixated upon. And it's often because we're feeling a little bit out of control. You know, it's a desire to control something or to see something through because there's nothing else I can control. So I'll try to control erratically this thing, you know, and wedge this round peg into a kind of square hole kind of scenario. So I love that we're doing the topic of, you know, not separating relationship and parenting, because they're all a product of relationship, and how we feel and how we're relating to each person in our family deeply influences how seen and heard and accepted that person feels, and in turn how willing they are to open to us. And so I don't really subscribe to a kind of top-down how we need to tackle the children kind of approach when we're immersed in parenting and in life, but also in this kind of isolation place. where it's really actually an opportunity for everybody to ask themselves how we all get our needs met here, and where we're closing off to another person, that being an invitation to why that might be. You know, why is my 3-year-old, like, why am I having a visceral response when I hear her, you know, really loud voice, for example, and what's that telling me about where I'm needing either some more nourishment or needing to widen my perspective on what's realistic right now, you know, and that line of questioning and that inward view goes hand in hand with every interaction that we're having with those that we love, so that it becomes a second nature, and so that we bring responsibility to the dynamic that we have with that person, as opposed to making it, you know, they're so, you know, insert description, you know, insert projection onto who they are, you know. And I've really been sitting with that so much when I notice different dynamics in the family, and I'll also notice when I'm really open and soft and flowy and, like, you know, melting into my husband, and when I'm not, and what the differences are with that. And similarly with my children, when I am and when I'm not. And with our children.
And when you dilute those down, do you see similarities? Talking about dynamics, do you see similarities between when I am and when I'm not with my husband, and when I am and when I'm not with my kids? Do they dilute down into almost a singular anchor point?
Yeah, well, I see a lot of it. I think I look at it through the lens of am I valuing and recognizing and respecting what is important to them, or am I standing in my place of my way is right, or what I think about the world is the right way, right? Because whenever we're in this place of, you know, our values are more important, or you know, how we see the world is somehow more evolved or more relevant in this point in time, and we minimize them, I can't open my heart to presence with them in front of me. When I can have a foot in what I love and what I believe, and also a foot in what they love and what they believe, that is where I feel most connected. So that is what I can consistently pull down in terms of where I open and where I close. And also where I close is also the place where I'm not looking after me too, you know?
Right, okay. So I was going to ask you, just back on your first point, I loved how you broke that down. What is it that creates the fertile ground for you having a foot in your values and a foot in their values versus I can't move beyond mine and the defense of mine? What is the fertile ground or barren ground that creates the setup for either one of those?
The fertile ground for being able to keep a foot in each is feeling like I have enough boundaries in place for looking after myself, whether that be making sure I get the drink that I was on my way to getting, or making sure that I've got dressed, or whatever has been important to me up until that point in the day, that I haven't negated or said yes when I really meant to no. Because if I've done that and I'm on like edge, then I'm no longer in a foot in each. I'm either likely firmly in mine as a protest, right? As a protest, because I haven't looked after myself all of these other moments in my day, and right now you're just asking too much of me with that glass of water, so no, I'm not even, you know?
Yeah, I do.
Versus that kind of fairly constant check-in with my needs are okay and your needs are okay, and together we can get them both met, and it doesn't have to be somebody losing out here, or it doesn't have to be me, you know, in a knee-jerk moment deciding you children need to learn to be more grateful, you know, go and get your own things, you know, like that kind of edge that we can also get to when we haven't listened to our needs throughout the day, and then, you know, crack and say, get it yourself, or, you know, without weaving what we want the end goal to be into a disciplined approach to teaching our children to be self-sufficient, as opposed to a knee-jerk, you know, I've had enough. You know?
I've got to protect what's mine.
Yeah, or the scarcity, right? Like the shrinking. Yeah. And noticing when we're doing it in the moment. Like, you know, I was having conversations with my husband this morning because we're kind of taking on board a little bit of a a project-based homeschooling approach, which is also around centering around a BMX bike and for my son. And so we've been looking at that and researching it. And my husband at one point said, I'm thinking about getting both. And like, we'll work on one. I could feel myself go like this close, going, thinking, well, we can't get both. And that's too much. And why would we get both? And I could have made him wrong and become hardened and just put up a wall and said, we're not doing that. Or I could have, or what I did do was get curious about, wow, like, why have I closed like that? In that moment, what was the story that I've got here about spending too much money or giving too much to my child or overextending or what is all of that layered belief that has taught my body to constrict and cave in like I did in that moment? And how can I actually bring that to my husband and explain that what just happened there, as opposed to him trying to figure out what the hell just happened and why I just cracked it about like getting 2 bikes, like that inward looking, which I think is so powerful for this time we're in, because there's nowhere to go and there's no other way to avoid like the little nuances and little practices that we all have that we habitually close through. And I love the invitation that there is nowhere else to go, so let's just meet it. Let's just meet what this 4 walls brings us so that we can polish our edges, I suppose. Is that helpful?
Oh, well,
I don't really know.
I could listen to these conversations till the cows come home, really.
Yes. But I don't know if I actually answered your question. I might have gone on a little bit of a tangent.
No, I think so. I think you answered my question. I was just going to say, did you want me to...
Because I loved what you were talking about, how beautifely...
In that post this morning?
Yeah, the post.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, do you want me to read it?
Yeah, give us...
Because maybe that's a good springboard from there, because there's many conversations in that summary.
Totally.
And I think probably for you too. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So if you're scrolling through our social media feed, you are looking for the photo of my daughter with the long blonde hair being hugged by my husband. Or if you're on, or it'll be the Stop Separating Relationship and Parenting. So it'll be either one of those. So here we go. And this was after a conversation from something that played out yesterday. And then my husband and I were having a conversation about it this morning while we're having coffee. In the end, when he'd hung in there long enough, my daughter told him what she wanted and needed to do the training session he suggested, to not have her brother around. Sure, cool, he said. Then this morning while going over it, he said, why can't she just tell me that at the beginning? Why do we have to go on this huge trip and I get to the point where I'm ready to tell her to go and jump and I've had enough before she tells me? I smiled. But isn't this the cultural dynamic? This is the setup, right? The relationship norm that is learnt in childhood and pattern repeated in relationship. We live in a culture where daughters don't know how to say what they fully need for fear of ridicule, fear of not being fully met, stored pain of not being met, insecurity, and codependency training. Because he should know, shouldn't he? He should love you big enough that he can read what you need, or at least chase her when she closes down, sulks off, or storms away, because she is worth chasing, right? Her hurting heart is his hurting heart, isn't it? Then add to that setup the unknown feminine truth. She will always test him. She will always test him. She will always test his love, test his capacity, test his consciousness with her. And he's left exasperated. I don't get it. I just don't get why it has to be such a big deal. Why does it have to be so complicated? Why does it have to be so hard? I just said X. Why can't we just do X? Why won't she tell me why we can't do X? Why do I have to go on this merry-go-round where I never win and all I'm left with is feeling more disappointing to her than when I originally suggested we do something for connection? Why? Why? Yeah, this happened this morning. He rubbed his hands over his face, you know, that like tension. It's just so simple. Tell me, he said. And I smiled.
I just love this.
Yeah.
Because I can see this is between my 3-year-old and my husband now. Like I can see what's that. Like this is the grown-up version.
She's a teenager. Yeah. Yes. Said beautifully by the masculine core, I said to him, but she's not. And it will always be this way. Surely this last year has shown you that. And here we are again. This is your dynamic. This is your setup with her for life. And he goes, oh, fuck. Women are so hard, he said. And I smiled. Or easy. You know and understand this dynamic from all of the years of conversations and work you've done with me. This could also be easy for you. You get it. You have the tools. You have the insight. You have the knowledge. And you know all you have to do is 1, leave no assumptions. And 2, tell her she has full permission to tell you her needs. Invite them in. Tell her you want to meet them. Relationship becomes easy when you can decode what's playing underneath. And so does parenting. Parenting is the relationship set up for life. This work is healing for us and every generation that comes after us. Mm-hmm. And so that's it. That's my post. But I could see this whole thing and I could totally touch into his exasperation and I could totally get it, right? So that like, it's almost so ironic. All I can do now is smile at the continuous relationship dysfunction that we have in this culture where it's almost like we just continuously beat our heads bloody against the wall when I'm going, just turn around and you don't have to beat your head against the wall anymore. Like, just turn around. You know, like it's so easy for me when I look over it and I go, but that's because she's like this with the setup of that and you're like this with the setup of that. So if you just know that, cool, that sounds empowering. Now you have all of the tools you need. And so it was that. And he could totally get it. Like, even as we're having this conversation, he was like, oh, fuck. Yes, I know. But why?
But it's still like a dog with a bone, like you're still holding on. Like even when Sylvie will just like have a massive like, you know, meltdown and then after the thing, she's like, why couldn't you just tell me like what you needed? Like, 'cause she couldn't.
Yeah. It's the existential angst of the feminine and the masculine. And if you just came to a point of going, it just is, and we can love what it is rather than trying to make them more like us. Because in his mind, he's going, well, if she would just tell me, if we could just stop this disruption so we could get back to life, if she could just dial down the drama so that I could be in the space of more nothing rather than more everything, then life would be sweet.
Yeah.
And she's like, but this drama is everything of life. You know, like it is the masculine and it is the feminine. And if we could just see that, yes, it creates angst within each of us individually, but that angst is there to design all of us to grow and deeper into the evolutions of who we are and archetypally and move, you know, bigger as souls. But also each of those things comes with beautiful superpowers and gifts. And you can't have the superpowers and gifts without having this part that comes with it. You want to get rid of the superpowers and gifts in order to get rid of this, fine, but then you just live in bland nothingness where there is no spark and it's just because we're all the same. As opposed to you want chemistry, you want polarity, you want excitement and the heart-opening body, soul, you know, this is life, then this is life, you know? And I was looking at this whole thing going, this is fucking beautiful. This is so beautiful. And old evolutions are like, I have totally been Jade and I have totally been Nick. And I could see in that moment almost like a cascade of so many lives. I could see all of the ways that I've done and been all of those things in relationships. So I could touch point into both of them and all of them, and then come back to, fuck, if only I'd known what I know now, all of that could have been so much simpler. I could have approached it in a completely different way. To have that knowledge is to have such a place of just adoration and awe. And I think that is love, rather than the fanciful infatuation style of love that our cultures come to recognize, And I'm saying to him, but this is her setup, right? You and her in dynamic is as much your stuff, rehealing, repatterning, blah, 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 as much as this is her blueprint for relationship. What happens here will be what she does in relationship when she's older. It's not separate. We keep going, yeah, but I parent. And I was thinking back to, aware parenting, hardcore me would have been shaming the fact that she couldn't speak up for her needs because I haven't met her needs often enough. And I haven't. And so she doesn't have this knowledge of her needs are, valuable. Fuck. How much of that is such a construction of the ego that seeks so desperately to find a level of control in the chaos, that if I could just control the fact that I meet every single one of her needs and therefore life is easier, not even.
It's a complete mind fuck and not even.
No, it completely negates the fact that you are in chaos of chaos as a soul.
And that, and that the relationship, it's always bigger than just you, right? Because the relationship to function is requiring that, expansion and contraction in that relationship. And that expansion to get there is going to look chaotic. It's going to look it's not going to be just linear tick box arrival. It's going to look and repair, and then often, and then repair, as well as those times where there's, cooperation and getting along. It's so much bigger than what I have or haven't done. It's bigger than us. But we also get to dance it with greater awareness when we can see the function of it.
Oh, exactly. The function of the dysfunction. This is totally the point, right? Even as my husband and my daughter are in this dynamic, I'm watching, this is fucking perfect. Every way that the feminine tests the masculine is to continuously bring him into greater integrity with his consciousness. If his consciousness is wavered and her body instantaneously recognizes it, which is designed to do at the deepest fundamental level, come back, better, sharper, clearer. She's always come back. So you can hate the fucking shit out of that and you can wrestle with it for your entire life, or you can love the fact that she's bringing you into greater integrity and consciousness, which in turn allows her to enter greater stages and depths of love. It's completely functional, as well as you and I both know, that's one facet of the multifaceted goddess or God that's present in this moment, right? We're going backwards to our childhood wounds. We're repatterning old triggers. We're healing old hurts. We're doing all of it.
And we're also one moment. Yeah. One dynamic. And also, I also don't doubt that it's also serving us in ways we don't know yet. How is this functional for my past, right? How is this chaos, this thing I can't make sense of, actually really way bigger than me, way bigger than what my little self right now thinks should or shouldn't be happening, Yeah. And that's also where I think it's really helpful to consider, because it helps us balance and keep in check our desire to control or to make wrong things that we don't understand,
Yeah, I do. So when it comes to, I think very often we separate parenting and relationship. Well, I can be the mother who does this, so my children will be different and have a different experience. But then I show up like this in relationship and I go, they're not separate. They're a blueprint.
Yes.
Our children. No, you go.
Well, I'm just thinking about that in terms of like, if I'm trying to create this set of rules with to give to my husband on how we relate to our children and what's right and what's wrong, then I'm kind of treating him like another child who needs to be taught, because this can be very common in the conscious parenting community. Yeah. Whereas if we ask ourselves, what is it that we want to imbibe our children with, and what are the skills that we want them to learn, and how do we want them to look at the world, then we need to ask ourselves, okay, how do I represent that in relationship with my husband? Like, how do I represent softness? How do I represent repair? How do I represent playfulness? How do I represent, morality? Insert whatever it is that you really value and that you want your kids to experience. How do I
loving the whole of you, Bridget, or the pieces that I like that are convenient for me?
That's right. Same thing. So, am I like bitching are my children overhearing me bitch to my friends that my husband's just so blah, 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 but yet I'm trying to espouse to my children to love the whole of you? I need to practice the biggest work for me to teach my children is to love who I've chosen to spend my life with, right? Because that then teaches them how to love into the world that they're given. Because my partner is the world that I've been given to experience life with.
And chosen.
Also, yes, / chosen, right? But how much can I choose to love into all of the parts that I find challenging, and to love into all the labels that I've projected onto them because they're actually representative of parts of me that I haven't appreciated? How much can I do that and see that that is what is going to be the cellular imprint that my children use to filter their world and see reality made up of as, even without really understanding that that's why they look at the world that way, but that's why they do, because that's all that they know. That to me brings enormous responsibility for how I relate. And that's, for me, so much of the parenting work is how I model relationship, and therefore how they're going to take that, So it's not like this either or, like I'll do one thing over here and then this separate set of principles for my kids. Like, they're all so inseparable in so many ways, which calls us into a kind of often radical, humility as well for the times in where we don't show up the way we'd like to. Then I think that that's also a great gift, because I want my kids to kind of be comfortable in mistake making, and repairing that. And of course I have moments where I'm like, fuck, like I'm so on edge. It's about them doing anything that's out of step with what I've decided that's right now. So how am I treating myself? Like, how am I treating myself? If that's how I'm feeling about them right now, that they cannot put a foot wrong or I'm going to lose it, what's that telling me about the story I've got right now about not being able to put a foot wrong? Or my husband can't do anything right now. Like, they're all just little mirrors of me and how I'm feeling right now. Nothing more than that.
I love that.
Like, and like I went to my son's school, back in school, and I could see like we're a mistake making, blah, blah, blah school. And I'm thinking, really? Like, most of us humans really still struggle with making mistakes okay. If they are in some moments, they're not in others. And the greatest thing we can do is even make it clear to our kids, like, I'm feeling really, I'm annoyed at myself for making that choice there. But I can, but being humble enough to show to our children, like, we're working through this stuff too. And that it's okay to open and be vulnerable even as we learn and unlearn what it means to be, whole human, right? So, yeah, I just think that this is like our family right now, especially so, is a microcosm of the world at large. Mm-hmm. And so we don't know what world we're going back to. Like, there is no going back to normal at all. And so whatever you're trying to avoid or run away from in the family is also what you're trying to avoid and run away from in the world, and is also what's trying to teach you where the areas of your own polishing are. And so how can we open up to those and love into where we want to, you know, shut them down or shrink or cut them off as, you know, parts of ourselves, and instead go, oh, you're here. I keep running into you. I really hate that part of you, but what is that there to tell me about myself? You know, what have I made that mean about myself that I can greet with more open arms as opposed to want to avoid? And, you know, avoid can look like, I need a nap, I want to watch TV, don't talk to me, you know, all the different ways in which we like to avoid within the family. And I just think, I love the invitation for us to see this as a really, really beautiful time for us to look at all of it as a function of learning about ourselves and the world and teaching our children to understand themselves in a similar way as the world revealing them to themselves.
Mm. Yeah, I totally agree with that. So I think we're going to wrap this conversation up there, Bridgie. But what I would love our beautiful listeners to know is that you can always dive deeper. There is absolutely places for you to break this open and move at your own pace with it. So on nourishingmother.com.au or Nourishing the Mother on Facebook or Instagram, you will see links to our Loathing to Loving program, which is static, all about the universal concepts that we talk about. And it's a self-paced, it's only $250 and you can work your way through it. And we have Sugar and Spice, which is our sensuality and sexuality opening. Again, $250 and self-paced. You work your way through it as you want to break these open. And if you're really ready for next level, then it's Queen School with me. So we do have this beautiful process. And if you just want to have a community where you're just continuously bathing in all of this, then it's soul-driven motherhood, right?
Yeah, so many great offerings, so many ways in which to, you know, we're all like, you know, doing, the beautiful thing is that when we lean into that, we're all doing this profound work and we all just kind of ripple off each other. And I don't know, we get to, you know, co-create magically this world that we're going to all walk back into at some point. And that's really inspiring.
Yeah. So to connect with you, Bridge?
suburbansandcastles.com, and you, Jules?
thepleasurenutritionist.com.
And head to nourishingthemother.com.au to find out all about our courses and offerings. And remember to nourish the woman to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
And if you want to support Nourishing the Mother and all the late nights, the early mornings, the blood, sweat and tears we pour into our art, then please go to patreon.com/NTM podcast and become our patron. As a patron, you're helping all of the cost of operating this podcast, the hosting, the editing, the transcription, helping all of that be completely covered, and joining a community who are all about honouring our journeys and continuing to open. The more support we have, the longer we can last. So become a patron. We'd love to have you. Go to patreon.com/NTM podcast. We literally couldn't do this without you. Thank you so much for listening, and please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.